Welcome to the Eclectic Gamers Podcast. Today is Sunday, June 26th. This is episode 170, and I am Tony.
And I am Dennis. And we are back, but we are not together.
We are remote. I have a head cold, or I'm on the backside of a head cold. I feel a lot better today than I have the last couple of days. My sinuses are finally like, hey, you can be okay now. So just to be safe, I mean, I didn't have COVID or anything like that. It was just a head cold, but you've got like work to do and stuff. So you can't risk being sick. You're an important person.
I'm heading out this evening out west. So I have a 3-day conference that I'm hosting. And I thought, well, you shouldn't be contagious anymore if you're in your recovery phase, but let's not take a chance on it because I'll probably get sick at the thing anyway. So
right.
I'm hoping not, but you know how Concred is.
It is Concred.
Because no, you didn't get Concred out of Texas.
I did.
Not COVID though. I tested 5 times.
You tested so often that you've got scar tissue inside of your nose.
My nose was bleeding the last 2 of them. Hey, it said scrape vigorously.
Well, yeah, but you're not supposed to use like a fingernail or something.
And then I've got a meeting and not as far away, but on Thursday back west, not as much west. And I was just like, oh my God, this week sucks. This week already sucks. But you've been busy, Tony.
I have been between my normal work stuff, my own personal hobby stuff. We've been doing driver's ed with my oldest and extra driving on top of the driver's ed. The cross country stuff still with me still walking as best as I can. I've got swimming lessons starting next week for the youngest. So it's just every day's got something going on. But I did get to teach my oldest how to change a tire since she picked up a nail. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember if I know I've done tires before. I'm trying to remember if I ever actually had any like help on how to do one. I can't remember. I remember one time I wanted to change a tire and I didn't have a breaker bar with me. I couldn't get the lugs off and I thankfully had an air compressor. So I was able to, it was a slow leak. So I was able to get home, but I was just like, ugh.
Yeah.
So what happened?
Oh, we were out driving, and I made her drive on some gravel roads, which she absolutely hated. And we'd apparently picked up, looks like a really big staple. And I noticed when we got home that the tire looked a little low. And then when we went out the next day, it was completely off the rim flat. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hey, good learning experience. I learned how to drive on gravel roads because I lived on one.
Yeah. I think it's an important skill to have. And it also helped that I was able to take her out to busier 2-lane roads and get some speed because she'd never been anywhere where she actually had to drive fast. I don't think she'd ever gotten into a vehicle up over, like 35 or 40 at that point because all of our driving had been residential and in town and in parking lots and stuff. So we got out and we got doing, 60s and stuff like that. So get her more comfortable with the drive-ins.
Now, does she enjoy driving with you more or your wife?
The instructor. She said it was easier to drive with the instructor. So, wife bought a car and now she's gone from hating driving to loving driving and wants to drive all the time. So she's always driving off and doing stuff.
It's always an adventure with her now.
It is.
The car does look nice.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm a buy the cheapest piece of you can. And then when it falls apart, buy the next cheapest piece of you can kind of driver. But I can see the joy of having a nice vehicle as I make you bleep twice already in the first 7 minutes.
Well, that's what happens when we're remote.
So I can see the point of having a nice car.
Mm-hmm. Well, the nicest thing I've had with because the last 2 vehicles I've purchased were not used, is there's so much less maintenance. So that's probably the big thing that with all my other vehicles, they all got to a point where I was like, if I was on an extended drive, I'd have to start wondering, well, what if this part breaks or what if this gives out? And am I going to be able to do it? Am I going to have to find someplace? Am I going to have to call someone for a ride? And I never really worried much about that after I got a new vehicle. Even when the one started to go out, because of course I drove it enough. My last one, I think I put about 230,000 on it. And, it started to have issues after 100,000 and then a lot more issues after 200,000, but it was still really reliable. So it wasn't always like, oh, the alternator's out, which was like something that had to be done on all my other vehicles.
Well, see, and that's about the time I buy them is I think all of our, I think the last, I don't even know how many vehicles that I've owned all have over 200,000 miles on them. It's pretty much like where they're at when I get them. So.
Well, I have not been doing as much. I have not been teaching any driving. I've not been buying any new vehicles. I haven't been having to bleep myself. It's been very, very solid. I started a new game. I guess it's probably arrived in other places as well, but Xbox finally got Fall Guys. So I've been playing Fall Guys.
Isn't that weird?
It's the one where you're like a walking bean and you're like playing the TV show Wipeout.
I would say, wasn't that the one that was the like huge Twitch deal like last year or the year before Among Us took over?
It was the pandemic hotness, and then Among Us usurped it. But I think Fall Guys was unlike Among Us, which had been out a few years. I think Fall Guys was a newer game. So it's on Switch now. I don't know if that was brand new or not. I saw some people discussing the latency and how they'd sort of solved issues with that on Twitch. It has full crossplay, but yeah, it's free to play. So
oh, nice.
You can get season passes and stuff if you want to, you can buy outfits basically, but otherwise, yep, you're like in these groups of 60 and you can play it in duo mode, squad mode. So you play with 3 other people, you can play it by yourself, and the different modes are neat in the sense that like if you're in a squad mode with, and I've done a few of those games where you're with 4 people and I just get grouped with them on, like you might not finish a race, or you fall off, which would disqualify you. But if your team got through or someone on your team got through, you might get to go on because it depends on how fast they did it and stuff. So it can help out. So yeah, they're like races. There's puzzles. There's, jumping things, but all the buttons are walk, jump, and grab. It's been fun.
So it's like baby's first battle royale game.
Yes, but it's hard. Oh gosh, like winning. I've won twice, and both of those instances were in group modes. Like one time our squad, the 4-person squad, won last night, and then I was in a duo mode and won a couple days ago. That's it. I've never won on my own. I've gotten to the final round before, but yeah, because, there'll be a big old beam and it'll just sweep you right off the map. And then you're cheering for a bean guy that's dressed up like a pimp. And I'm just like, come on, pimp guy. Don't lose to the guy who looks like a piece of sushi.
Pimp bean.
Pimp bean. And pimp bean won, which means I won, even though I got wiped out like in 10 seconds. I consider it a moral victory.
It's a moral victory.
Yes. So, before we move on to our segments, and we don't have a whole lot, at least not in pinball, we don't have a whole lot. Well, we got a big thing, but it's really the only thing to talk about. But we had a couple emails, and one of them I'm going to go ahead and cover now before we move into the pinball segment. And this is from Scott Goldberg, and this one's mostly targeting you, Tony. So
I'm being targeted.
Us. You are. Just dodge. If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge an email. And he wrote, "Boys, the consistency, candor, and humor are appreciated. I never miss an episode. Recent highlights for me are when you two throw out the buzzwords of our times. Web 3.0, Tony. NFTs. Blah, blah. The walking story you told this past episode was gold. I had to replay that part. Thank you for all the content. The friendship you share makes the podcast what it is." Well, thank you, Scott.
Yeah, thank you very much. And that I don't have a good walking story because I was the last time I was on the front side of getting this head cold. So I just kind of meandered slowly, and it wasn't hot because it was like a front had just come through. So I don't have a good story. It's slow fat guy wanderings at that point.
I mowed yesterday. It was hot out and I didn't like it.
I probably should have, but I was like, you know what? It is like my sinuses are just absolutely full. So, I'm not going to do it. It was enough to go out and change the tire on the car yesterday.
Yes. Well, I didn't want to, but I thought, it's going to actually be, because it wasn't that tall. But then I thought, I'm not going to want to do it when I get back from the conference. And that's what broke me. I was like, I got to do it now because I'll feel really pressured to get it done this next week. And I'm not going to want to do it. Even if I don't get sick, I'm not going to want to do it. I'm going to be too tired.
It's time to hire a company.
You know what? I'm too cheap still, but I might reach that point.
You just got to. You get the.
I'm one slipped disc away from reaching that point.
You get the random guy who comes over and mows the yard every week.
Yeah, where are the kids? Aren't there supposed to be like kids going or pushing their mower around, being like, "For $20, Mister, I'd sure like to take care of your swell yard." Isn't that how they talk?
Well, I don't think $20 would buy them enough gas to mow your yard at this point.
I did see this was months ago on Reddit. I saw someone share this. It was a doorbell cam, and it were these two kids. We're talking like maybe 11 to 13 would be what my guess on their age. And it was the winter, and they were going around offering to shovel driveways. And this person, they go, "Hey, can we shovel your driveway for you?" And the woman who answered the door goes, yeah, no, I'd love to hire you to shovel the driveway. And they go, "Great, that's awesome." And then she's like, how about $20? And they're like $10 each. And she goes, yes. Let me go ahead and get the money. And she walks off, and the little doorbell cam's recording. And this one kid's like, he goes, "We're effing," he didn't say effing though, "we're effing rich." And the other kid goes, "Yeah, these rich people, they don't want to shovel their driveways. They want people to do it for them. They've got all the money." And this other one's go, "Let's do a really good job because she's so rich." And the guy's like, "Yeah." Except one of them made fun of the other one for being too short or something. There's a whole kid thing going on.
Oh,
God. They were just, I'm like, where are they? I'll give them $20 to mow. That's probably like that's the size of my yard. That's probably exploitation. I'll give them 30.
I was gonna say your yard is like huge, especially the backyard that you can't even get a rider into. So whoever you hire has to be able to take a push mower back there because you can't even get a rider through into the back.
You know, life is sacrifice, and that can be their sacrifice. All right. So anyway, that's all I have for you. So let's go ahead and go to pinball, Tony. I know you've been looking forward to this because we've been talking about this via the messenger tool online for ever since the day it was announced.
Which was the day after our last episode, because
I think it was Tuesday, wasn't it?
Tuesday after our, however,
I'm not sure when the stuff leaked. The stuff leaked. I don't know. Anyway, it happened really recently after the last episode, but what can you do? That's our fate. We know this. We knew this going in.
Yep. I put together a beautiful, lovely Instagram post with all of my thoughts and dreams about it. And then there was so much background noise that you could barely hear what I was saying. And I was unable to get it cleaned up enough to make it worth posting, because instead of using my normal mount that I have that for my phone was just kind of propped up, and it was just, you could vaguely hear me in the background and then just the motor and vibration.
Yeah. So I never got to hear it, but I heard it was good.
It was gold. It was absolute gold.
It's gold. You were weaving some gold. That's a Zach Mini expression. That he just weaves gold. Well, we'll weave some gold now, Tony.
We'll do our best.
So for anyone who has not listened to any other pinball podcast since this announcement,
what is wrong with you?
Yes, you're going to be shocked to learn that Jersey Jack Pinball unveiled their latest game, Toy Story 4. Pinball.
I still can't.
Yeah. Well, don't you worry. We'll discuss that. But let's hit some highlights. And I do have a link in the show notes for people that want to read up on this. It's to This Week in Pinball's deep dive on Toy Story 4 Pinball. So there are two versions, a limited edition and a collector's edition. The design is Pat Lawler. The lead software engineer, who I believe was responsible for most of the rules, is Joe Katz. As usual, the artwork is done by John Yowsey. That's who Pat always likes to have do his artwork. Pricing, the limited edition model, which is the more common model, and they can produce up to 5,000 of those, is set at $12,000 US. The collector's edition, which they doubled the run count from Guns N' Roses to 1,000 units, is $15,000 US. The limited editions, they had already built a number of them and have already shipped them out. The collector's editions are slated to start being produced at some time this fall. They all have the official licensed art package. They all have a 27-inch backbox LCD. They all include a 10-inch sort of tablet style, what they call carnival game LCD in the playfield or above the playfield, kind of where the ramps are in the upper left. There is custom speech done by Buzz and Woody, though that's a little misleading. They did get Tim Allen to do custom callouts. Custom callouts are done by Tom Hanks's brother, which I guess Tom's brother does all of the marketing, like toys and like all the product stuff. Supposedly they sound the same, so most people are cool with that.
Okay.
I'm that's not a world I'm aware of. I heard some of the voicing and it sounded like Tom Hanks to me, so it was good enough of a sound alike to fool me. There are the carnival games that I mentioned that appear on the LCD in the play field area. There are 12 games included. One of the there's a video pinball, virtual pinball mode called Tiki Party Pinball. The hot rails, the lighting effects on the sides that were in Guns N' Roses, they brought those back. I'd say the main toy is probably this jump ramp that lifts up and it's flanked by a couple of individually up and down, I guess, automatically controlled posts. But it's a jump ramp that you can launch the ball off of. There's also a spinning wheel over on the left-hand side of the game. They brought back one of the Hobbit Bash toys and made it Gabby Gabby, which I guess is the villain from the show. I don't know. I've not seen Toy Story 4. They call those little pop-ups, as I look through this list, the Benson pop-ups. I guess that's because of they represent the ventriloquist, which I assume that's his name. There are some super spinners. I believe those are opto spinners. There is a RGB LED marquee stunt deck. There's a ball diverter setup going on with the ramps and stuff. There's a 3-ball ball lock with a drop target over on the left-hand side near the spinner. And then a few other things in the games is there are some stand-up forky targets on the right. It's got 4 pop bumpers. It's got a saucer. It's got a scoop. It's got 1 mini flipper in the upper right. And it's got the 2 primary flippers. It comes with a shaker motor and Visaglass. It's, of course, got the built-in camera like we're used to with JJP games. And a few other little bits and pieces. Collector's Edition has a red powder coat chrome armor. It's got rad cals. It's got over 450 individually controlled RGB lights, and it's got a Pixar Luxor. I don't know. It's got some sort of ball shooter knob that's associated with Pixar. The LE version only has over 300 individually controlled RGB lights, and it uses a blue powder coat. So I'd say that's the main stuff. There are a few other things involving the Collector's Edition as well, but I don't see a point in really going through them, other than it also has additional custom speech by Bo Peep, the Bo Peep character.
Ooh, fancy.
So, Tony, there's so much here, and, it's not yet clear to me whether or not we're going to get one of these on location. I'm sure we'll end up playing it at a show or something at some point, but for the time being, it's important to note to the listeners that we have not played this game.
Correct. I've not done anything that would be considered location pinball in a while, actually.
Last month, I think.
Yeah, not since May. Things have just been not worked out that way. But yeah, sure. I hope we get a chance to play it. I'll be 100% honest. I'm not that interested. I was interested in the concept of a Toy Story pinball machine, and I think, like a lot of people, I felt, if anything, betrayed as it drops this Toy Story 4.
Betrayal. That's a strong sort of trail.
The Toy Story franchise is such a big cultural touchstone, and it has so much going for it. Then they turned around and dropped its Toy Story 4, the one very few people watched and is by far the lowest rated, and some fans absolutely hated it. It's just like, ow. It's like, could you not get the licensing to do the entire franchise or to do just the first game? Was the only way to get it was to do 4, which is even worse because it didn't come out until 3 years after 4 came out.
Well, and my initial guess would be that they thought it would come out sooner, closer to the film. But of course, we discussed that when Guns N' Roses dropped, and it was like Guns N' Roses ended up coming out just a few months after when Toy Story, the movie Toy Story 4 came out. So I was a little surprised that was the order they went in. I'm assuming that the Toy Story 4 game, for whatever reason, was just not ready yet. I mean, at this point, with the Hot Rails going in, and that Hot Rails seemed very GNR oriented, I'm guessing that at least changes were made if it was not yet, like, let's say, not even very far along. It was just sort of surprising to me, but
it is surprising that how could it, I mean, there's not like there's anything that feels to me in this game that should have delayed it 3 years when they'd been talking about it for so long already.
Now, have you seen this movie?
I saw parts of it.
I've only seen the first Toy Story movie. I haven't seen anything else.
I've seen all of them except for this one. I've only seen parts of this one when my kids were watching it, but my kids are old enough that they don't really care about Toy Story.
Oh, they didn't run and say, "Daddy, please buy us a $12,000 pinball machine."
No, Toy Story is not a touchstone for my children.
Okay.
So I did not have to deal with explaining to them that $12,000 for a pinball machine. I mean, come on, Toy Story 4. Let's start bad.
With that. Well, we've started with the thoughts on the license, and I concur with you. I think I don't know anyone who doesn't agree that this would have been more appealing broadly to just about anyone if it had either been all 4 of the movies, the first 3 of the Toy Story, the trilogy, or just the first movie.
Right.
All 3 of those seem universally agreed upon. Even people who love this game seem to universally agree that all 3 of those licensing scenarios are better than doing just Toy Story 4. The split seems to be some people think doing Toy Story 4 alone was still worth going for the license. I wonder if there would, I speculate that there would have been a better license pick if they truly could not get original Toy Story incorporated in some capacity.
I agree. I think if you went in trying to get a licensing deal and you could only get Toy Story 4, I think they would have been better off walking away.
Yeah, I just think there have been something else in the Disney Pixar stable that I think could have fully gotten the rights to that would have worked better.
Yeah, I agree. But then again, this is pinball and people will spend money on it regardless. Even if they don't like it, they're going to spend $12,000 for the lowest level of a game that is not.
Let's discuss that. Now, here's a quote from someone. I can't say who, because I can't say where I've read this quote, but this is a true quote that someone I know wrote about after they played Toy Story 4. They wrote, and it's not Zach, I'll tell you that too. They wrote, "Toy Story 4 is a winner for the common folk. You're all crazy. This is going to sell well, 100%.
For the common folk.
Exactly.
The common folk who can drop $12,000.
You are too far down the collector rabbit hole if you think common folk spend 5 figures for a pinball machine.
That's just, I mean, that is so out of touch. It's like if you call your boss, because we've been talking about new cars, if you call your boss because your car's broke down, he's like, well, why don't you just drive your other car? I mean,
well, why don't you drive your German car?
It's just, there is just no context. It is just such a difference of thought and a different way of looking at things that, especially with where we are right now, I paid $4.65 a gallon for gas yesterday when I got gas. And to think that the people who are doing that, the common folk who are doing that so they can go to work and pay all their bills, also have $12,000 just sitting in their pockets to buy a subpar pinball theme.
And so because obviously, and who knows what the person had their motivations, and perhaps they regret now choosing the phrase common folk because I'm now using it as a weapon. But even hardcore collectors had to take a step back on this because of what you pointed out to a lot of people. Even if they love Toy Story 4 is a subpar theme compared to other themes that are readily available. But here's the analysis that I cannot help with. And I totally see, and we discussed this on the Pinball Show, Zach Minnie's perspective about if a game's not going to lose much value, though, in his view, he doesn't care if he's paying $8,000 for a game or $12,000 for a game because he'll sell it and get his money back. So, it's a wash to him. But, and I'm like, I acknowledge that. But obviously there are two factors. One is on the flipper sort of side, it's still, you have to have a certain amount of liquid capital to be able to buy a $12,000 game. A lot of people don't just sit around with $12,000 readily available to spend. So, but they might have 5,000, you see, for fun stuff. So that's where it's a question about how much cash are you tying up in games. That's part of it. That's everyone's own individual experience. Here's the thing, setting that aside, because we don't know if the value will hold long term or not. Yeah, I would guess the CEs probably will, because the true LEs from other companies seem to be holding fairly well. It's still something of a gamble. Of course, we don't know if things always will stay up or if they'll fall down. But here's what, for me, Tony, on pricing, what I end up going back to, and is, let's look at the LE. So I'm looking at the pictures here on This Week in Pinball of the playfield of the LE. And now I'm mentally right now, and I'm sure you can do this too, I'm mentally looking at the playfield of Godzilla Premium, which retails MSRP $9,000. I don't understand why I would pay another $3,000 for less of a game.
Oh yeah, no kidding. I mean, it is a very empty playfield, comparatively. And I don't.
It's like opposite day.
It is.
This is always like people would look at Woz and be like, "Look at all Woz is Wizard of Oz," for people that don't know, and people would be like, "What? Look at all these mechanical features." And now I look at this, and I'm just like, it looks like a Stern Pro.
It does look like a Stern Pro
with lots more LEDs. Let me be fair. It's got lots more LEDs, but it's like, what are our features here? We got a tablet, which no one cares about.
The fact that they put a tablet above the screen and they put virtual pinball on it is just...
It's kind of funny to me. It makes me laugh. It makes me tummy laugh. Oh. I wanted to play Zen Studios in my JJP.
I mean, it's just... it's crazy to me.
But I'm just like, mechanical... I'm not going to do the whole what people used to do, coil counting, but I'm just like, you look at Toy Story 4 and I see mechanical features of note. If you want to count the tablet, even though it's not a mechanical feature, it's up to y'all. But we have the jump ramp, which I think looks pretty cool.
Yeah, that little jump ramp looks cool.
We got the Gabby Gabby Bash toy. Well, I hated the trolls in Medieval and I hated the Hobbit monster, so I'm really not keen on that. But hey, it is a mechanical toy. And then there's a spinny wheel, right?
Yeah.
And then there's like one drop target over by that spinny wheel for the ball lock thing, if you want to talk about that. But then let's just think about Godzilla Premium. Thousands of dollars less. It's got a Mecha Godzilla with a magnet and a tummy magnet, do tummy ball grab. It's got a ramp that rotates for a standing drop or standing target bank to be the shield for Mecha Godzilla. So that's a pretty cool mechanical feature. It's got a collapsible bridge ramp, which changes how the ball behaves. That's a cool mechanical feature. Of course, it's got the Newton ball magnet grab to feed off of that left side orbit to the upper flipper. That's really cool. And then, of course, a collapsing building. And again, I know it's a different game, but it's thousands of dollars less. And that's where I struggle on the pricing. I look at this and you can't, I'm sorry, it's not 2012 anymore. It's 2022. Sticking in 300 LEDs does not impress me.
Yeah, that is kind of crazy to me. I mean, that many, putting LEDs as a selling point on a game in this day and age is dumb. I can go get LEDs and fill my kid's room with LEDs. Actually, one of my kids does have LEDs all over the place in their room. It's no big deal. They're normal now.
And I get that someone has to program the light show, but if we're doing like a cascading light effect, if you're using 20 bulbs or 200 bulbs, the cascade program effect is the same.
Right.
There's not $3,000 worth of LED programming in this. Let's be honest about it. So that's my struggle. Most people don't seem to be arguing that either. I think most people are just like JJP saw people flipping games and they're trying to make sure that money isn't being left on the table. I just think it's really interesting that this company has seemed to have gone with the decision that I think they've always been, but I think they're just committing to it now, that they're like, this is for high-end collectors. Other people need not apply.
They're the Jaguar.
I guess. I don't know. I don't know. It was interesting that now that we're on the back end of the pandemic and operators and the locations are back. I mean, this was the one they decided to drop the standard, and that actually probably was smart to drop the standard edition, because I heard they were selling like dogs. They weren't moving units. But when you looked at like GNR standard compared to the other two, you really had to be willing to settle. It might not have been that bad on Wonka, but it was on GNR. And I don't know. Anyway, the pricing I think is a huge barrier to a lot of people. I just think it's just a bridge too far for a lot of folks.
I think so, and I think it's going to make it a problem for operators because
I don't expect many operators other than those that flex about having all the ones that were already buying premiums and LEs for their location, which there are some. There are some that do that.
There are some, but most general normal operators, and that's a thing. This is a game that seems to be designed for a certain type of player, designed for fans of Toy Story 4, but they are not going to be able to play this game because it's not going to be operating anywhere. Nobody's going to be able to afford to operate it.
It's interesting because it, in so many ways, other than price, really seems like it's a very operator friendly game.
It does.
It's a great location theme, I would say. Kids will know Toy Story. They're not going to have money to buy a $12,000 game, but they would have money to put money into one.
I've heard it is very inexperienced gamer friendly. Is that a nice way to put it?
Long ball times. Yes. Long ball times. Relatively approachable code. In fact, I guess it was noted by the team that they wanted a lot of people to be able to get to the wizard. Or at least the first side was, I guess you do a side as Woody and a side as Buzz. And the idea was, though, that people without high skill would be able to get through one of those paths. And from initial reports, that seems quite true.
Yes.
Because the high level players were like beating the game both sides the first day.
Right. It's like ball 2 or game 2.
And that's not necessarily a problem. It's interesting because most of the time on games that seem targeted to the homeowner, they've wanted to make it so that it's a journey to be able to quote unquote beat the game. And I do think this might hurt in the sense that I think there will be some people that they sell their games once they quote unquote beat them. And if you're beating this game really fast while it's still in production, there are going to be more popping up used faster than there would otherwise. So there's a little bit of a market effect perhaps. But again, with Jersey Jack noting that in the first day they sold out all the CEs and made like $30 million, I guess it doesn't matter.
Right. Well, you knew that was going to happen. And
the CEs, no, that doesn't. Granted, they direct sold 1/10. The rest was just sold to distributors.
Right. And then the question always comes up because they've not even started making them is what is the market going to be like that? Because remember when people suddenly started dumping Halloween positions for less than they paid for them. The same thing is always possible in any game from any manufacturer.
Sure. I don't think it will be like that for this game because the one thing, you people who hate the price, people who hate the theme, people who don't think it's good bang for the buck, the one thing I have seen almost universal praise for is that it does shoot well. Like it's Lawler, He execute to a lot of people. It's Lawler's greatest hits. It's Gophers plus Wonka or whatever. But even as easy as to get through the code, that geometrically it is enjoyable to shoot, and that is not the case for a lot of people when it comes to Halloween. Halloween is just seen by a lot of people as a bad game. This seems to be seen as a good game that is way too much money.
Yeah, and I think that could be a very valid way to look at it.
Yeah, it's just the weirdness is it's been a long time since we've seen people have a good game, but it also be seen as really, really easy. I think the last example everyone would probably cite would be Munsters. Like geometrically, Munsters is a very well respected game, but people could not get past the shallow code on it.
Yeah, and this is, as I recall, this launched with 1.0 code supposedly.
It's basically feature complete, is my understanding. I don't know the version number, but yeah, I mean they've done a couple updates, I guess, since it initially came out. Like I think one was to integrate the score bits or something about the score bit, and then there was some other. I don't remember what the other thing was, but yeah, like all the modes and stuff, my understanding, are in there. I hope people don't go around. This was as silly. It would be as silly now as it was with Munsters, but if there are people hoping like, oh, well, maybe they'll add like more wizard modes and stuff. It's like, why? It's exactly what they want it to be. We don't have to like what it is. I don't mind that they made it easy. I found it humorous just to hear people, buying this game and then immediately winning it.
Right.
That's just amusing to me. It's not actually necessarily a defect. It was, I think there was a lot of sense when Stern did Munsters because there were a lot of people that really respected Iron Man. And Iron Man was a pretty shallow game. I mean, you could say, well, Iron Man was basically unbeatable because of the way to get the one do or die. The ultra hard do or die was basically, it required you to do it all on one ball and was near impossible. But most people would see all the other aspects of the game, the achievable aspects, pretty quickly, even though the game was hard.
Right.
It had a hard layout, but it was not deep code. In this case, you've got a gentler layout and not particularly deep code, but deeper code than Iron Man. I don't know if it's deeper than Munsters or not. I never finished Munsters.
Yeah.
So
it'll be interesting to see. I do want to play it because I have heard about how well it shoots. I just think it's a disappointing overall entry.
Yeah, I think everyone, because we had known it was Toy Story for so long, to find out it ended up just being this one slice of Toy Story turned a lot of people off. And then the price, of course, was going to alienate. No matter, even if it was all the Toy Stories, the price was going to alienate a ton of people.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing is the price is something that I knew it would be up there, but I did not expect where it's at.
I knew they'd raise off of GNR because of inflation. I did not expect I don't even know. I don't remember how much more how many thousands more the collector's edition is versus GNR, but they also doubled the CE run. But they sold them. I mean, even if it's through just to distributors, they sold them all. Financially, these are probably good moves for the company. It's just, from a collector aspect, which is a player aspect, I just don't think I'm going to get to play this until Texas or something.
Yeah.
Because I can't imagine an operator buying this in our area. Maybe a collector will loan one to an operator. I mean, maybe they'll succumb and hope that they can get their money back on it. And buy, I don't know. I don't want to speak for any of the area operators, but, it's just, it makes it harder to get access to the pricing. That's the problem.
It does. It very much does. And can we talk for just 1 second about just how freaking horrible that topper is?
I looked at the topper like twice.
It is literally just a box with a bunch of fiber optic wires coming out, like the little fiber optic light up tree that you had, that you'd have
my
in
Christmas
your room
tree.
in the 90s, the little just direct fibers, and it's all, woo. Oh God, it's so terrible. It's so bad. I honestly, in my mind, this is the worst topper, or it's not the worst topper, but it is a worse topper than the ones where it's just the plastic standees. I think so.
Don't know. It sure is fireworky.
I guess it's big super specials. People are happy.
Well, regardless, congratulations, though, to Jersey Jack for putting out a new game.
I do hope to play it because, like I said, I hear it shoots well. It's just not the theme that anybody wanted.
It almost was.
It almost was.
Okay, well, I think that's enough of Toy Story, and we're almost done with pinball. The only other thing to do is Rumor Corner.
Rumor Corner. Ding dong.
So this episode's Rumor Corner is not a brand spanking new rumor. This is, again, one others have probably heard because I've obviously heard it. I've heard it from multiple places at this point. And hey, they can't all be brand new unless I just make up all the rumors all the time, which would just be goofy. So here's the rumor, Tony. Stern Pinball. Purportedly, they have the license for He-Man Masters of the Universe and that Jack Danger is the designer of it. What are your thoughts?
Wow, that's a lot to take in.
I mean, my initial thought is it's not He-Man 4, so there's that.
There is that. Is it the new He-Man show that just came out like earlier this year or late last year, or is it the original He-Man in the Masters Universe?
I have not heard. Here's what I'm hoping. Here's what I'm hoping, Tony, because this might play into what you're about to say. We'll see. I remember seeing a post on social media where Jack Danger said he wanted to make pinball weird again. He-Man is not weird.
Not at all.
Unless they do the live action movie.
Oh, man.
Yes.
That'd be so bad.
Yes, I know.
Why would they do that?
I'm not saying they would, but it would be the weirdest thing they could do with He-Man, would it not?
Why would they do that to themselves? It would be a weird thing to do.
I don't think they would. But I'm just saying, Jack wanted to do something weird. Trying to salvage something out of that movie, that's weird. That would be weird.
That would be weird because I don't think you could really salvage very much out of that movie. Not at all. But holy, wow. I don't know.
I had He-Man toys as a kid. I don't know if I'd be into this or not, though.
I'm wore out of all of the nostalgia.
Says the guy watching Stranger Things.
I haven't watched Stranger Things in weeks. Not since I finished it last time. But the thing is I like stuff that's done well, but I don't know. He-Man just feels like such a stretch. I mean, I loved He-Man. I was one of the biggest He-Man fans, and even I don't really reference back to He-Man when I think back to it. When I think back to the kids, even though I had tons and tons of He-Man stuff, my primary thought back to shows I watched as a kid is Transformers, G.I. Joe, Silverhawks, and stuff like that. I also remember a lot of the shows that lasted like a season, and I thought got just completely robbed because they were way better than they were treated as.
Well, if it is He-Man and it is the original cartoon, if he wants to try and make it weird, we can't ever make it as weird as the movie.
Correct.
But he could put in a what's going on mode based off that YouTube. That's the other option. That would be weird.
That would definitely be weird.
Are you not rumor-tained, Tony?
I mean, I'm rumor curious.
You're rumor-tained. You meant to say you're rumor-tained. Well, what we need to be tained on now is video games, Tony. What's going on in the world of video games?
So much has happened in the world of video games. I'm not going to talk about most of it, but there was still a bunch of stuff. Immediately after we recorded our last episode, I stayed at your house for what I thought was going to be a, 30 or 45 minute Xbox Live event. And it turns out to have been an hour and a half. And
well, they do own all the companies now.
Yeah, that's true. And I should have thought about that beforehand, that they own everything. So, and they're still only the third largest, or will be when it's approved. But, so we stayed and watched that, and there was a whole bunch of stuff. I'm not actually talking about a whole lot of them because most of them are too far from release, because they're all scheduled for release in the next 12 months. And, no surprise, almost everything's coming out on Game Pass because that is where Microsoft is leaning at the majority of its time and effort. But there was a lot of interesting, stuff there. Including a much deeper look at No Man's Sky 2. I'm sorry, No Man's Starfield. I make the joke, but honestly, I was just so shocked as they just kept talking about Starfield, and I'm just sitting here going, haven't I already sat through this presentation one time? I'm pretty sure I've been here before. I'm sure it'll be better than No Man's Sky's initial launch. Well, no, it is Bethesda, and they launched bad.
I wouldn't be sure of anything.
We'll have to see. It'll be weird. I was most disappointed with the Bethesda side of it, though, that even with it being an anniversary of Fallout, they didn't announce anything Fallout related other than more Fallout 76 stuff.
Yeah, I guess after the fact, they made a statement that the next Fallout game would be done, but it's going to be done after the next Elder Scrolls.
Right, and the next Elder Scrolls game was them throw a pretty picture of some stuff and say Elder Scrolls 6 was that last year's E3 or 2 years ago E3?
Yeah, I'm starting to think a new Fallout might be close to like 2028 or beyond.
Right. I figured we'll get the next Fallout sometime around the time we're actually living Fallout. So we'll see where that goes. The other big announcement, the one that was probably in my mind the big announcement based upon the reactions online, Kojima is making a game for Xbox.
Yes. Nothing seemed to upset people more than that. It's like, I was all like, don't you all have Kojimas?
It was, I've seen so much hate, so much betrayal, so much, how could he do this to us?
No, he belongs to Sony.
Right. And he's even come out recently and said, no, we're still doing stuff with Sony. I'm just making a game for Microsoft now. And people are just like, it's like baying for blood. They're just so upset about it.
This is like, it came off like if the next Uncharted came out on Game Pass.
Right. It was
just, I was like, when did this, they don't have a first party relationship. They get along clearly, and he's still doing stuff with them. I was just surprised how visceral it was.
Well, that was my surprise because I don't recall them ever having anything seen as, yeah, Death Stranding was a PlayStation exclusive, but that didn't mean that Kojima Productions was a PlayStation exclusive. And I don't get where people took it that way, that he would only ever make for PlayStation, and that it was so weird. When I saw the thing, it was like, interesting, he's going to make something weird and insane like he always does because that's his brand. And I didn't think anything else about it. But when I started reading stuff online, you would swear that Kojima had walked up to somebody's house and shot their pet.
Mm-hmm. Yep, he's a dog killer now.
That is the kind of response. It's like you go to that website, does the dog die? And the answer is, for that live, yes, Kojima shot him. I don't know.
Yeah, that one was I was surprised. Of all the things to get worked up over.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like, yeah. And other than that, there were a lot of interesting looking games, not just there, but in that time spot that would normally have been taken up by E3. All the companies did major lives, and there was even a PC Gamer live that was done. Which had the E3 people come out and say once again that E3 will be back next year. And I don't know. All these things did real well without having to pay the money required them to pay to get into E3. They all did very well. So I think that this could have been a really bad thing for E3 this time around.
Probably.
We'll see how it goes. But beyond just that weekend's of sheer enjoyment and interest, we have so many other interesting things that have gone on. DICE, makers of Battlefield, had been asked about some of their side projects, games like Mirror's Edge and the like, and they say that they are fully committed to Battlefield, and they have put all non-Battlefield projects on the back burner. And they are committed to Battlefield 2042, and that reports that the development team has been reduced to maintenance levels and is in full-on abandoned ship mode are patently false. They stand behind 2042, and they will make 2042 the game that is expected to be.
Oh, so are they finally going to get rid of operatives and bring back in the classes? Because that's what it would take.
It is, and you know they're not.
No, they're not. They already made a game that people who play Battlefield didn't want.
Right.
It feels like playing Rainbow Six Siege, except you're running everywhere.
Yeah, it is definitely a negative for them, and it's probably in their best interest to cut their losses and concentrate on other things. The fact that they are backburnering everything that doesn't say Battlefield on the box is kind of sad.
Yeah, I just don't. You know, here's the thing. I won't blame you, but you kind of fall into partial blame, and that is Final Fantasy XIV. See, Final Fantasy XIV has done more damage to the video game industry than anything else because it makes people believe they can save a dead project.
It does. And it does it by having people think that it can get better and by providing a fun story and an interesting story and characters that people actually like. And most AAA titles just don't have the time or money once they get done spending everything on bells and whistles, and, retreats for the executives and spa days for the managers to spend money on things like story or characters because they think, well, I can't put microtransactions on something like that. So let's just make another deathmatch game.
Yeah, I think a lot of them may also forget like the life cycle from the developer standpoint as well on the reform of Final Fantasy XIV. It wasn't a bunch of memos coming out saying, oh, we're not we haven't reduced it to maintenance mode. We're committed to doing something. No, they came out on stage, bowed to everyone and cried at their failure.
Yeah.
And they said, we've failed.
Yes, they did.
Failed you. Where's DICE's? Where's their tears? I don't taste their tears,
and you never will because they'll never say
very
something
sorry
like
to
that.
Me. Well, then they're not really sorry, are they?
No, I don't think they're sorry. They don't care. All they want is to get they need to get microtransactions back up. Speaking of Final Fantasy, it has been announced for sure that Final Fantasy 16 is going to be taking place in a more fantasy-like setting.
Okay.
Than all the more recent Final
15
Fantasies.
Was all kind of, it was like, let's drive in a car.
Yeah.
Bro trip.
Yeah, it was basically like Road Trip, the movie.
I actually liked 15, except I never really understood that, like, the combat wasn't fun for me. It wasn't bad. It was just, like, I don't know. The tutorial didn't seem to do a very good job explaining to me exactly how to maximize my combat. So it was just mostly I could just wail on everything and win. So it didn't matter. But anyway.
Yeah, no, 16 is supposed to be going back to the more traditional type actual fantasy stuff. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, I would like that. Is there any Activision-Blizzard news? Surely not.
Surely not. No, there is. They had their shareholder meeting, and the upsets that came out of it. No upsets came out of it. Exactly what you thought was going to happen happened. The entire board was held to their positions, including Bobby. No surprise there. And it was like, I don't even know the percentages, but it was a complete walk. It was like 566 million or whatever thousand votes to like 68. It wasn't even close. The interesting things that did come out is, around the same time, they released a, investigation. Activision-Blizzard investigated themselves to see where their issue with their widespread harassment issues and everything were. And they found that there's no widespread harassment. There's no issues. There's nothing that's not been reported or has been handled wrong. And since 2016, there's been nothing, just minor things that have all been 100% correctly handled. And all of this is just from an overzealous person with state of California putting a suit out. Please ignore the $18 million settlement we had to put out to the federal government in addition to this ongoing lawsuit. None of that's real. So they investigated themselves and they found themselves did nothing wrong.
Well, I'm sure glad they looked into themselves.
And talking about looking into themselves, another thing that came out of the shareholder meeting is the shareholders voted to approve the release of an annual abuse, harassment, and discrimination report, to which upper management immediately replied that, well, this was a non-binding vote and we'll consider it, but we're not required to do this.
Okay. Yeah. They're probably right that it was a non-binding vote. I just think it's interesting. I try and visualize what would happen if I, to my governing board, after they did a vote for me to do something, then told them, you do know that this is not binding and I will do what I want.
Oh, I'm sure it would turn out absolutely fine.
I'm going to stick this in a total aside. I had a work meeting. I have, several recurring meetings, of course, as you do. And one of them, one of my board members is on the same group. It's a team we work with the state. And they live out in a very rural part of Kansas, very rural at the Colorado border. And we were in this virtual meeting and she had to step away. And then she came back. She's like, sorry, they had a plane crash. The pilot was fine, but something happened with the plane and he had to put touchdown in a field. And all I said, Tony, was, oh, so will your county now just make that field a new municipal airport? Is that just what you guys do? And she just looked at me a little zoom and just goes, Dennis, you're an ass. And half the people online looked I think they thought they were really scared that something was going to happen to me. And I, of course, being me, Tony, said, so does this mean I'm now ex-executive director? And she goes, no, your punishment is you have to stay with us.
See, it's nice when people understand you.
Yes. Yeah, but just to be sure, after in the email, I said, thank you for putting up with my snark. And she goes, it's much better than sitting through boring meetings, Dennis. Because other people they laughed after I made a joke at my own expense about my possible soon termination.
Right.
But you see, I don't know. With Activision, I could have probably just said that and actually meant it in a mean way.
Well, yeah. And then you could have punched her and it'd been okay.
Punch.
So,
speaking of punches, we had an email in the video game part. I stuck it here at the end, Tony.
Perfect. Let's go over it.
Okay. This is from Chris Chandler. He likes to email us a lot.
Hi, Chris.
He wrote in. Yes. Hello, Chris. He asked us to interpret a graph.
All right.
Now, I'll try and describe it. I'll try and paint a picture because people cannot see a graph on a podcast. That would be impossible. But he asked us to interpret this graph, and he had a few questions of his own that he embedded in the email. And the questions were, are games truly getting better? Reviewers becoming less critical? Are gamers' expectations getting higher? Review bombing more often? I wish they provided other views like median instead of mean, and P95 views to filter out the extremes. So Here's the graph for people to understand. This is an average of Metacritic data across all consoles from 2000 to 2022. The way it works is there are two line charts line graphs that Tony and I are looking at. One is following the average critic score, and one is following the average user score. And so for people to kind of get an understanding, the starting date of 2000, the critic score was under the user score. User score was about a 76, and the critic score was about a 74. Those both dropped as time went by. I'd say the low point seemed to be around 2006 to 2007, where the critic score had fallen to about a 67, and the user score had fallen to about a 70. Then the critic score started to go way up, and the user score continued to dip. They kind of met in 2010 is where the crossover happened, where the critic score was at about a 71 and the user score was at about, well, I should say the critic score is a little over 70 and the user score is about a 71. And then after that, it flips where the critic score is always higher every year since then. As of 2020, the critic scores were up to about a 75 and the user scores were down to about a 65, I'd say. So that's what the graph looks like. They both started higher than they both started fairly high. The critics dipped down and then have gone up above where they were in terms of average score since 2000, whereas the user scores started way high and now they are at their lowest in the 20-year period. So what are your thoughts on that? What do you think? Do you think review bombing is a big issue as part of it?
I don't know if it's a big issue. I know it is an issue. I think the biggest issue here is the fact that the truth of the matter is most of the critic scores at this point don't mean anything. Critics will give a game that is the worst game they've ever played a 60 out of 100. I mean, they don't rank low anymore. There's been multiple articles and stuff talking about how the video game journalism is so different now than it used to be. The critics aren't the same. They view things differently. They have different interests. But the big thing is so many of them, they're just straight up bought. Their reviews are bought. Everything's paid for. They get everything. And the user reviews are going so much lower because, there's a lot more people doing it now than there ever used to be. And everybody has very different tastes. So whilst they might like some types of games, they don't like other types of games. And also, people are so incredibly rabidly protective of the people that they found online that they do like, the influencers and such, that an influencer simply saying something minorly negative about a game will make everybody who's never even played that game rank that game terrible because so-and-so hated it. And the opposite. You'll see people rank things really high even if they've never played it because so-and-so likes it. It's just like what happened where Among Us blew up out of nowhere after having been out for several years was because influencers started playing it online and it got super popular. So I think that has a lot to do with it. And yeah, there is a review bombing problem. I don't think review bombing is all of this problem, but there is a definite review bombing problem. I would be much more interested to see this data, like he said, with the P95 views to filter out the extremes, because I think the extremes probably are deeply shifting this. It's hard to believe just naturally anything where it's a 1 or a 5, like on a 5-point scale. It's so hard to believe because there's no nuance to it. You either absolutely hate it or absolutely love it. And so often those reviews, when you see them online, there's no comments or anything. It's just a 1 or a 5.
Yeah, those are some good points. And I hadn't really thought about the role of the influencers. So that's an interesting aspect. I think the thing I would note, and if anyone digs up this chart, I know I think I saw it show up in an article somewhere too. I just don't remember where. It's not as shocking. Bear in mind that we're not looking at a y-axis set at 0. So we're zoomed in quite a bit. The current spread is 10 percentage points. It's like the critics are averaging around a 75 and the users are averaging around a 65. That's really not that big of a spread on a 100-point scale. Yes, it is much more extreme than it used to be, where the spread was like 2 percentage points back in 2000. But again, when we go back that far, the internet was still really, really young. There were a lot less user scores back then. So there's also, maybe you could argue there was less. I mean, console popularity has grown over time because this is noted as being all console data. So I do agree. I don't know how much about the video game reviews in this day and age on the critic score, if they're purchased by the manufacturers or not, versus what I just see as sort of a gradeflation style approach that has plagued video games really even back in 2000. It's just, for whatever reason, the way it ended up is we grade on a 7 out of 10 scale. And yes, as Tony noted, a terrible game is a 6 out of 10 or 60 out of 100. And that's like it. It's like you can't get lower unless the game is non-functional. And I think it's stupid because the whole bottom part of the percentile graph has no value, but they've gone at it like they're giving letter grades, and then it's being interpreted on a numeric scale. And it's like, you think about the way we do letter grades in school, and it's like, we don't really talk about 30%, 40%, 50%. Those are all F. So who cares at that point? And it's kind of like that, but when you're sticking it on a numeric chart, there's a reason why we don't show the y-axis at 0, because there's nothing down there. It's all empty space.
Right.
So I think just that, because that's so prone to happening with critics, and while I don't know necessarily on the monetary side about, paid reviews per se influencing the Metacritic score, I do think there starts to be considerations about, if I'm too hard, especially in some of those middle years, if I'm too hard on them, they're going to embargo me. They're going to not let me have early access. I'm not going to be able to do a review until the consumers can buy the game. And so there's reasons to, they know there's reasons not to, professional reasons to not be too hard on them. The flip side is, like what we maybe see with pinball, what you can see in watches to a degree, and probably all sorts of other hobbies, where the media people know the people at these companies, they're their friends.
Right.
They don't want to be too hard on their friends because they got to know these people in the course of doing their job. And again, I know people like to joke. I'll do a pinball reference. People like to joke all the time about straight down the middle when they do pinball reviews. And I've made fun of it as well. And there's all, like Greg Bone's always going to give a B+. And it's like, well, this is really no different than what we see with video games, though. They're always giving high scores to even fairly garbage games.
Right. And that's what it is. They just score everything high. And I think you have a very valid point. A lot of it is with I want to keep my access. I don't want to take the risk. I don't want to risk hurting my chances of getting into some event or getting the next thing or doing the next review or getting a special behind the scenes look at something or another, because that's where my money comes from.
So anyway, there's just there's changes on the stuff. The user scores. I just think the influencer thing is a very interesting part that I hadn't thought about. There's just a lot more users now, though, participating. So I don't know how much of it is review bombing per se. When you think about the broad spectrum of games, not a lot of them, to my knowledge, face review bombs. Some high profile ones do, but I think some of this might be more backlash though against the critics. And they're like, wow, you guys are way too, like, you're giving this game full of bugs a huge pass because you like the story. And I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to shave 10 percentage points off of it.
You're just going to cut it to pieces. Just cut it down.
Snip, snip. Well, I think it's probably time for us to cut this episode off because we've covered all our topics, Tony.
We have. It's been a wonderfully remote episode this time around.
Mm-hmm. So for those that want to reach out to tell us about how great this remote episode was, they can email us at eclecticgamerspodcast@gmail.com or go to facebook.com/eclecticgamerspodcast and shoot us a message. And I will talk to everyone in a couple of weeks, and Tony will probably talk to everyone in a couple of weeks. And so until next time, my name is Dennis.
And that's a growly dog in the background. Bye-bye.